Okay, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm going to call to order the Richmond City Council meeting for Monday, February 26, 2024. May I have a motion on the minutes?
Second.
Any discussion on that? All those in favor? Any opposed? That is carried. Any agenda additions or deletions?
Your Worship, there's just one agenda deletion. The second presentation by Gateway Theatre will not be taking place and will be rescheduled to a future meeting.
Okay, fair enough. So with that, we're going to go to the NAIOP award presentation. Joshua Reese, tell us about it.
Thank you, Your Worship and members of Council. I'm happy to advise Council that NAIOP Vancouver has awarded the city Most Business Friendly in their 2023 awards for municipal excellence. The award recognizes municipalities that have excelled in creating environments that are positive for business. Richmond was specifically identified for this award because of our fees and approval timelines for industrial developments remaining generally consistent over the previous years, as well as the amount of industrial space and planned development under construction. With that, I am happy to present the Mayor on behalf of Council with the award.
Can you remind us what NAIOP stands for?
NAIOP, it used to stand for the North American Industrial and Office Parks Development Community. Now they have dropped that and they just simply go by NAIOP.
No kidding. I'll come around and I'll accept this award, and thank you for the presentation. I just do want to observe that NAIOP hasn't always been this complimentary towards Richmond. So this is a very good sign of us going in the right direction. So thanks for coming.
Obligatory photo. No worries. Excuse me. Get to there as well. And one more. Great. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Josh. So, with that, may I have a motion to resolve in a committee of the whole to hear delegations on items on the agenda? Moved and seconded. All those in favor, opposed, carried. We do have a couple of speakers who have pre-registered for the council meeting, both on item 14. So first of all, we'll go to Crystal Laderas. Please come forward. So our delegations, you have a seat. I've already identified that it's item 14. That's the massage body rub parlors, I believe. And you're given 5 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Crystal Laderas, and I'm with Swan, Vancouver. Our Executive Director, Angela Wu, sends her regrets for not being able to come here and speak with Council again, but her household is currently very sick. I'll be reading a statement on her behalf. Swan is a nonprofit organization and registered charity whose mission is to promote the rights, health, and safety of newcomer women engaged in indoor sex work through frontline services and systemic advocacy. I am here to express Swan's grave concern with the recommendation Council is voting on to continue escalated enforcement at body rub studios and amend bylaws to allow for increased fines and more ticketing options. While the recommendation may seem to be a simple bylaw amendment to increase fines for operators, we urge Council and the public not to forget the rhetoric and intent behind the original motion put forward by Councillor Cash Heed in the November 15th, 2023 meeting. The purpose of this motion and subsequent recommendation was to shut down these establishments in an attempt to eradicate sex work. Swan has been doing outreach at licensed massage parlors for over 20 years. Women who work at these locations are simply trying to make a living. But many say recent bylaw operations have been traumatizing. They tell us bylaw officers and RCMP stormed into businesses, they blocked exits, detained workers, and took IDs. Their safer workplace is no longer an option, and they are moving underground to private apartments where they face a greater risk of violence, robbery, and even exploitation. If council cares about the safety of its community members, it should recognize that moving forward with these recommendations will endanger these women. I know that you recently supported the exploration of bringing a supervised consumption site to Richmond as a form of harm reduction and a way to save lives. This is the same principle. These licensed businesses are the safest places for women to work. And contrary to some of the claims made here in council chambers, there has not been a single trafficking case in a Richmond licensed massage parlor in over 20 years. What we have seen in the last 2 decades is a tragic case of a serial killer targeting sex workers, the Missing Women's Commission of Inquiry, and the implementation of the BC Association of Chiefs of Police Sex Work Enforcement Guidelines. These policies were created in the wake of years of deadly violence against sex workers. It's 2024. Let's not wait for women to die in order to implement policies that promote safety and compassionate interactions that build trust between city staff and sex workers. I'm asking you just to take some time. Do not rush into approving these bylaw amendments. Look at best practices for how to keep women engaged in sex work safe. The cities of Vancouver and New Westminster have sex work safety guidelines for city employees, including bylaw officers. Again, I'm extending Swan's invitation to council members to hear from the women who are being impacted so that you can understand what is really required to ensure their safety. Speak with community-based organizations, read evidence-based research on safety for sex workers, and learn from other municipalities that have adopted sex worker safety guidelines. Move forward instead of backwards and make a decision based on evidence. To ignore the people who are most impacted is to ignore the fact that they're also community members who deserve safety just like any other Richmond resident. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. We've got 3 people who want to say something, but this is for questions only. We'll have a debate later. Councillor Day.
Thank you so much for your presentation, and I really appreciate your coming forward. This is a complex issue that I think most people in Richmond don't have any idea of the comprehensiveness of it. You were saying that Vancouver has sex worker guidelines. Do those align with the federal laws?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, what we're seeing in the sex worker guidelines is a close alignment with what the BC Association of Chiefs of Police have put out for their sex work enforcement guidelines. They encourage compassionate interactions with workers in order to build trust with that community.
Okay.
Councillor Heat. Sorry, doesn't matter, I turned on the wrong. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a couple questions just for you based on your expertise. You've been in this industry or supporting these women for a while, and we certainly do support them. The women that have been brought in from outside of Canada, do they come over here with the knowledge that they'll be working in the sex trade?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, these women migrate out of their own choices. They have their own agency and they decide to come to Canada for various reasons. They may decide to come here to work in healthcare or in the hospitality sector. They face discrimination and racism. They worked in low-paid jobs and may have decided to do sex work. They have qualifications from overseas and are very educated, but those qualifications are not accepted here in Canada.
You would agree this is mainly a cash industry?
I can't speak, through your worship to Councillor Heed, I can't speak to the business side of things.
So would you agree with me that people that go to these massage parlors pay for sexual services?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, if there are workers in these massage parlors in Richmond or anywhere else that are offering their sexual services, they are immune from prosecution for offering their sexual services or advertising.
I'm just
Those are the
asking
main
just
community
asking.
that we support. I can't speak to the clients.
Okay, my last question is, do they get T4 slips and are they available for unemployment, or is it just cash under the table?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, again, I am not involved in any business, so I cannot speak to the details of business transactions.
Thank you, Mayor.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions. First off, were you the voice I heard on the CBC radio today at 4:45?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, that was me.
Oh, great, thanks. There's one part of it I'd just like you to explain. It went by a little quick. You mentioned on the radio program about Burnaby keeping inventory of their workers as an alternative method from what's being done in Richmond. Could you speak to the differences there?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, many of the tickets that we're seeing being handed out in Richmond are for unregistered employees. If we're not seeing compliance in a certain area, it's important to recognize or see why that's not happening. We spoke with workers in Richmond just a couple of days ago, and they said at their workplace, women want to register, but in a way that doesn't invade their privacy. So the first thing you have to do to register to be a massage parlor worker here is to go to City Hall here in person and out yourself as a sex worker. Then you go to the RCMP detachment and out yourself as a sex worker to RCMP. A lot of these women face stigma about their jobs and their workplaces, and now they've outed themselves to public employees when even their family and their closest friends don't even know about the work that they do. They also work in healthcare and education. They work in the public sector and they do not get paid enough to afford rent in Richmond, but they do not want to lose those jobs because somebody finds out that they also engage in sex work. So when we're looking at the alternative that Burnaby has for your question, Burnaby requests that employee or the business itself keeps a record of employees for up to a year after they leave. And in this case, inspectors can request it and then that is handed over. This is a less invasive way to register and not so much of a concern for privacy.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much. The next delegate is Bronwyn McBride on the same item.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Councillors. My name is Bronwyn McBride. I have a master's in public health. I completed my PhD at UBC, and I'm a postdoctoral fellow at SFU. I've contributed to epidemiological research on health and safety among sex workers since 2017 and have authored over a dozen publications in top scientific journals, including The Lancet. I have led numerous studies evaluating how punitive enforcement of body rub studios impacts the health and safety of marginalized women. I'm here because I care about the welfare of these vulnerable women, and I hope that you do too. As an expert on this subject, I'd like to highlight the evidence-based likely outcomes of the current bylaw enforcement approaches in Richmond. Available evidence globally and my own research in Vancouver proves that these approaches will make marginalized newcomer women more vulnerable. Punitive enforcement of body rub studios displaces women to apartments where they face greater risk of violence. My 2022 study on immigrant sex workers' interactions with authorities found that hostile police visits to their workplaces are frightening, stigmatizing, and undermine the financial security of women who are already economically marginalized. To avoid these harmful occupational impacts, women often leave the safer indoor venue and start working alone in private apartments, where they face increased risk of being targeted by violent aggressors. One participant in our study said most robberies are in apartments. The client calls to be let in and a bunch of people follow. I heard an instance where after the service was over between the woman and client, he pulled out a knife from his jacket. Another said there were 2 women working in an apartment together. 2 guys came and tied them up. The women weren't injured, but everything was taken. They didn't dare call police. Robust global evidence and my research show that punitive enforcement destroys trust and drives sex workers away from police protections. My 8-year-long Vancouver study involving 900 sex workers found that only 12.7% of immigrant sex workers who faced violence, like assault or rape, reported it to police. This highlights a widespread lack of trust and barriers to accessing justice. Hostile enforcement leaves newcomer women afraid of authorities. In my study, fear of police was so prevalent that participants didn't call police even after facing violent armed robberies. In tandem, immigrant women's exclusion from protections is known to and exploited by violent perpetrators. When our interviewer asked, "You don't know anyone who called police after a robbery?" our participant said, "No. That's why robbers are fearless. They know you can't call police." Richmond RCMP's objectives emphasized building trust with sex workers, but public health research shows that venue raids force sex workers into an antagonistic relationship with authorities and make sex workers less safe. Finally, extensive global evidence shows that managed indoor venues like body rub studios are the safest spaces for sex work. There are many sensationalized stereotypes about exploitative pimps, but stereotypes are not an acceptable basis for policy decisions. Policy should be based on data and research evidence. I conducted a study of sex work venue owners and managers in Metro Vancouver in 2020. Despite inflammatory tropes about abusive pimps, my study found that 68% of the venue owners and managers were also current and former sex workers. 88% were women. In contrast to stereotypes about exploitation, my research shows that these body rub studios are places where women are working collectively for greater health and safety in a stigmatized industry. In my study, venue managers weren't outsiders. Many were employees who had transitioned into management roles, similarly to career trajectories in many industries. This local research found that managed indoor venues like body rub studios provide critical security supports like client screening and control over the work environment, which enables greater occupational safety for workers in a stigmatized industry. The bylaw enforcement strategies currently being employed in Richmond are very concerning, as all evidence shows that they will increase violence against sex workers. They push women away from police assistance and towards predators who exploit their lack of protection. I can't imagine that this council would want to pursue a policy approach that all evidence shows will harm low-income, racialized immigrant women. Thus, I hope to see the City of Richmond cease this regressive policing of indoor workspaces and take an approach grounded in public health evidence to support the safety of marginal immigrant women. Thank you.
Thank you very much, ma'am. All right, may I have a motion to, we've got a couple questions. Councillor Heat.
Question. Thank you, and thanks for your presentation once more. I asked similar questions in committee, and I'll ask them now again, similar to what I just asked the former speaker, is the women that do come over here, based on all of the research that you've done, do they come over here to enter the sex trade industry working in massage parlors, or are they brought into Canada, for example, if they're outside of Canada, for some other reason?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, in all of my research, the women who work in managed indoor workspaces, licensed venues like body rub studios, are women who have come to Canada through legal channels of their own volition, most of whom worked in other industries before taking up sex work, facing low pay in industries like restaurants and hospitality, facing racism, discrimination, facing language barriers, and facing very high costs of living, including supporting children or parents or both. They chose of their own volition to enter into sex work where they have more flexible hours and higher pay.
And I'll ask you this again. You didn't answer it last time. This is a cash industry. Are you aware that people pay for sexual services at these body rub parlors?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, I cannot speak to the specifics of any particular body rub studio or any specific venue. I can tell you that adults engage in consensual exchange of sex services, and women who do this have the right to be safe and free from violence at work.
Sexual services for cash money?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, I can't comment on how these businesses are operating in terms of cash. I will say that in a criminalized industry, cash is common and also makes these venues more targeted by thieves.
You've been studying this for 8 years, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. And are you aware of the women getting T4 slips, qualify for unemployment, or any other benefits from working in these establishments?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, that's not something that I know about.
Thank you.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just two questions I have for you. Thank you for being here. The first one, we just received something today, and I haven't had a chance to go through all the attachments with it, but maybe you're familiar with it. It says here that this article claims that increased enforcement only acknowledges the inherent danger of sex work no matter where the location. So I think with your explanation earlier, there clearly is more danger in one location versus another, correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, yes, the location matters. It depends on having safety in numbers, having a licensed indoor space comes with a lot of security supports. Yes, it's different by location.
Okay, thanks. My final question, a group that I'm not familiar with called the Vancouver Collective Against Sexual Exploitation, or VCASE, has a mission to end all forms of sexual exploitation by focusing on the demand for paid sex. Are you able to comment on, does the city have a way to do that? Could you make recommendations on how cities' bylaws could assist that?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, sorry, just to clarify, are you asking how the city can reduce demand for sexual services?
Yes.
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, I don't have any such recommendations. Since the beginning of documented history, most countries have criminalized sex work in some form or another. If it was to be criminalized and legislated out of existence, that would have already happened. Sex work cannot be legislated away. It can be made safer or less safe. and that's a policy decision.
Can I just get one follow-up then on that? So you're saying that the option for us to go forward is not to try and remove these businesses or ban the use of sex service in the city. It's not going away. So your take and your knowledge on this is to work with the best practices or best case scenarios, and what we're looking at tonight is not going in that direction. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Wolf, yes, exactly. What we would like to see is policy and bylaw enforcement that is based on consultation with the affected communities and finding a way to do that is respectful and supportive and does not lead to more harm or push women into violent situations.
Thank you.
Councillor Rao.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. If I understand you correctly, you did most of your research on legal establishments, right? So what is the data on the illegal establishments?
Through your worship to Councillor O, I cannot comment on a lot of situations that are happening in underground situations. My research focuses on managed indoor spaces such as massage parlors and body rub studios, which are documented here in Vancouver and globally as the safest venues for sex work to take place.
Okay. My other question is, again, from your research, what is the percentage of organized crime with this kind of legal establishments? I mean, are they being controlled by organized crime to a very large degree, or, it's only a few of them? So what is your data telling you?
Through your worship to Councillor O, I don't have a background in criminology and I can't really comment on organized crime. I can say that I have been into many of these venues to distribute safer sex supplies, and what is happening there is a lot less sensational and a lot more banal than most people would think. It's many workers, people who are waiting for clients to come in. People are working a job, trying to get paid, trying to support their families and make a life for themselves. It's really very ordinary, and it's not, from everything that I've observed, going into these spaces, seeing what's happening, it's very banal, ordinary exchanges, just people who are trying to make a living.
Thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you. Well, it's an uncomfortable subject for all of us, especially if you're not in the industry. Obviously, after 8 years, you've been to a lot of places and visited clients, visited workers, visited managers. How often do you come across someone who has been basically exploited and is a victim of human trafficking?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, thank you for the question. I have personally never come across this. I think that there was a stat from the Richmond RCMP that they found a single case of trafficking in the past 20 years. Human trafficking, sex trafficking, that is separate from consensual sex work, and all of my research relates to women who have entered into sex work of their own volition, their own agency, and their own choice. That being said, environments where sex work is taking place, these are environments where people might come into contact with women who are more vulnerable to exploitation, and that's why it's so important to support and hear organizations like Swan who are building relationships with these women so that they can provide support in an instance where someone vulnerable is being exploited. That's also why it's so important for authorities and police to build good relationships with this community, because they are the point of access to people who might be in a really difficult situation. And by rupturing that trust, that person might not be able to get help.
Do you give out information for people that you suspect might be the victim of human trafficking?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I personally haven't been involved in that. I've just been involved in going into settings and providing sexual health resources. That's probably something that Swan could speak further to.
Okay, well, I'll ask those same questions of our RCMP and bylaw officers. Thank you for coming forward. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yep. Is there anybody else in the audience who wishes to speak to us on an item on the agenda? Anyone else? We have a motion to rise and report. All those in favor, opposed, carried. Brings us to the consent agenda. I'll read the highlights. We have the receipt of the committee minutes, the contract renewal for the supply and delivery of computer equipment and related services, regulation of material on highways and public places pursuant to Section 46 of the Community Charter. And I should say that there is now on the table the bylaws which provide a definition of the order to comply. There's the application by Firework Productions for a temporary commercial use permit, 8351 River Road on Duck Island. A land use application for first reading, which goes to public hearing on March 18th. The portion of 12900 Steveston Highway and 11311 Rice Mill Road, rezoning from AG1 to AG3. And 18431 Westminster Highway, rezoning again from AG1 to AG3. Then we have the Hamilton Area Traffic Calming, and finally the Swift Eco Waste Management, Inc. solid waste license application for a composting facility. May I have a motion to adopt those items by general consent? So that's moved and seconded. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. So I wanted to speak to a couple of items. So item 10 and item 11 are two farms that would like to build housing for seasonal farm workers. And the housing would be strictly for farm workers. It would not be for Airbnbs or anything like that. My question of staff is that sometimes when you own a farm, things go poorly, whether it's due to weather or it's due to maybe a dormant crop. So if there was a situation where a farm didn't need the workers for a particular year because of maybe restructuring, replanting, or whatever, is there some leniency so they don't have to immediately get rid of the housing and put it back to its original state?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, as we had noted at the planning committee meeting, yes, there is flexibility built into that to ensure that.
Okay, perfect. That's good because, you know, farming is tough and we've got to make sure that they can get the workers that they need and that they have the housing that they need because it's too expensive to rent anything. I had a question on Hamilton area traffic calming. A resident said, why in the world would you reduce the speed on Westminster Highway from 50 kilometers an hour to 30 kilometers an hour? But I understand that's not what we're doing, that the reduction in speed is just for the smaller roads. Is that correct?
Through your worship, Councillor Day, absolutely, that's correct. We're not recommending a reduction of speed on Westminster Highway.
Yeah, so the only real change to Westminster Highway is about $20,000 worth of delineators that would be attached to the side of the road to kind of separate the walking and biking areas from the traffic areas. Is that right?
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Day, yes, the delineators will make that separation, but we also feel that they will slow down traffic that is speeding in that location.
Okay, last question is traffic for trucks. I mean, there is a highway right there. So why do these heavy-duty trucks have to take Westminster Highway? Why could we not designate them or to, say, the highway?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, right now Westminster Highway is in our major roads network, which is we receive funding from TransLink for. If we would like to remove trucks from Westminster Highway, we would first have to talk to TransLink and see if they'd be amenable to that. And if they aren't and we wish to persist, we would have to consider trying to remove that from the major road network.
So in the meantime, could we ask the RCMP to enhance enforcement of truck speeding?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, we've asked the RCMP on a number of occasions to do more enforcement for all speeding.
Okay, and while there is a perception that there's a lot of speeding in the area, I don't believe the facts are indicating that. Isn't that right?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, through the work that we did for this study, it really appears that the only place we had any real speeding was around the Cranberry Children's School.
Okay, so while the recommendation number 2 is that speed limits on local roads in Hamilton be reduced from 50 kilometers to 30 kilometers, the speed doesn't actually justify it. It's more what you believe the people of Hamilton want.
Through your worship, Councillor Day, I think what we recognize here is that we don't find anyone exceeding the 50-kilometer speed limit, but we do find a lot of people feeling unsafe on their local residential roadways. This is one of the things that we asked them about in our public consultation, and more than half of the respondents indicated that they were interested in that. So while we don't have accident data that supports a reduction, we do have a lot of people feeling that 50 kilometers an hour is too fast, and that's why we're making this recommendation.
Okay, if in 12 months the neighbors who live in that area say, yeah, that's too slow, can we go back to 50 kilometers an hour?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, absolutely. If the public came back to council or staff and we wanted to have another look at it, we could certainly bring that back to council for their reconsideration.
Okay, thank you. And then number 13 is the Eco Waste Management Solid Waste License application. So I read the application and staff's review of it, and there are like 15 items that the applicant did not comply with. In other words, didn't provide the information. So staff's recommendation is that we do not support this application at this time because there simply isn't the information that we need to make an informed decision. So I support that decision because we've already gone through the harvest power nightmare. We don't want to go through that again. So let's make sure that this applicant knows what they're doing and they're going to reduce odors. And until they come up with the answers that are required by Metro Vancouver, I think we should put this one on the side burner. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thanks very much, Your Worship. I'll be supporting most on it. I do have some questions on, I might as well go back to Hamilton if I could. It appears to me there's a lot of confusion. I'm a bit confused tonight of what we were putting forward. I thought we were reducing the speed on there, and I guess I have some questions of staff on that, if I may, Your Worship, because we can't equate costs and not to safety. When we're talking about safety there, and obviously the people in Hamilton, I understand three council members were at a meeting, so they would be able to speak better than I do to help me. Do we have metrics on actual speed? You made a comment you weren't worried about speed on Westminster Highway, and I've stood out there and almost got blown over and run over by buses and trucks. So do we have metrics on how fast they go? And in a particular time, especially summertime?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, yes. So we've done a lot of speed studies out in that area, and we also have permanent speed reader boards, which also keep those metrics. Now, what we have found is that in general, there isn't a lot of speeding on Westminster Highway, but in front of the Children's Centre there is, which is why we're recommending some traffic calming measures in that location.
Okay, I guess, and again, I wasn't at the open house. We have 437 respondents, so a quarter of the population, if you wish, on that, and of that, half of them, were they the people along Westminster Highway saying we want traffic calming, or do we know where they were? Were they over in the other sections of Gilly Road, etc., McLean Drive?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, no, we could find out. That's certainly in our data, and if council wishes to know that information, we can certainly make that available.
I would like to see that. The reason being, from the daycare along, we have a seniors resident right at Gilly. We have more development going on there. And we also have Vancouver Coastal Health there. So I'd be interested in those metrics if we can. And we have no special words for changing any of the truck speed.
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, no, we do not.
Okay, thank you. I think we should be looking at truck speed over there myself. Maybe I'm going at the wrong time, but it's okay. But to me, the trucks just barrel through there. And as we well know, that we have to have a little bit of self-discipline and enforcement of the trucks there. So that's where I'm confused. I understand the residents and the people, and we take our time driving to Tim Hortons, driving back, whatever. But I don't think the trucks, to be quite frank with you, obey anything. And I'll be honest with you, Your Worship, you can tell TransLink too, the buses go too fast along there. I've seen them scrape up against our curb and leave lots of black marks along that. So anyhow, I have concern, but I will be supporting the space along the Cranberry Children's Center and that. And I wish we got a bit greater turnout or comment, maybe some of the other councils will comment on what the Hamilton residents said. Because to me, that's the most important thing is the people that live in that area. So anyhow, I will go along with this, but I think we should keep this one active, to be quite frank, as an active file, and not just put it on the shelf and say, oh, goody, we've dealt with it. I think there's more to come. Thanks very much. Your Worship, I do want to indicate and support the idea for seasonal farmers and seasonal migrants coming in to work. A number of years ago, we supported a development and bringing people in from Mexico because they had the skill work. I guess my question here is, we're sort of, in order to permit more seasonal farm relocated, et cetera, we got to give a first read and rezone it. Do we have any policy with regard, or can we create policy with regard to bringing farm workers in so that we don't have to rezone every time that somebody comes and says, I need 100 workers to pick the cherries in our trees or pick the pumpkins up, et cetera? Do we have that to staff through your worship?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, the current zoning bylaw regulations do require rezoning to an AG3 designation for any sites that is supporting on-site seasonal farm workers.
So we can't change it?
We're
rezoning one by one. We can't have a general policy.
Correct. That is a site by site.
Okay. Thanks very much on that. I do appreciate that those comments on it, and the idea of picking up material on highways and public pursuant to the section of the community charter. I support that. I think that's long overdue, and I appreciate that. And the last one, I'm glad to see staff come up with the eco waste. Remember that came out of the LR by the province. Not by us, and now they want to go ahead and do it. And I'm appalled, to be quite frank with you, is the number of tickets that have been written out and the number of violations. And obviously, our bylaw people have done a good job. On that, I don't know if anybody answered. Have they? Is there any approach to have cleaned up their act on that to follow our guidelines? I don't know if anybody can answer that. It's not a great report card.
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, this is Swift Eco Waste. I believe the facility you're thinking of is Eco Waste Industries in behind, so separate facilities.
Yeah. Okay.
That's one where we've
said
we require rezoning.
Rezoning, yep. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Galanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. Other councillors asked most of my questions, actually. So I'll just comment that I am going to support everything on the consent agenda. I'm also happy to see us pass forward those applications to the Agricultural Land Commission for the seasonal farm worker housing. I actually have one question about that. It just kind of came up as everybody else was talking about it, so if you could come back. I'm just curious, so if we have this housing built, which is so important, and then another farm needs farm worker housing, and say the farm that has the housing doesn't need it that year, is there any chance it can be like in an inventory that it can be used for farm workers coming up for another farm?
Through your worship to Councillor Galanders, it's a bit hard to say without a specific proposal in front of us in terms of how that would work or operate. As I understand your question, it is generally would seasonal farm workers be able to be located on a property associated outside of the operation. The AG3 zoning does require that the housing be located on the same property or in association with the same farming operation.
But maybe if it was the same farm operator but on a different parcel, then it wouldn't be a problem. Okay, and thank you. And then for Hamilton traffic calming, I agree with the comments from the other councillors about this, and I mean, I think 25% is probably the best we can hope for with any surveys, just like any elections, but I was also a bit confused about what we were voting in, because how it's worded that all local roads in Hamilton will be 30. I could interpret that as also Westminster Highway, and it wasn't included, or at least I didn't see it, because it says the details on the reduction were in a report dated January 12th that wasn't in the package, so I wasn't sure exactly, but that question's been answered, that it won't be reducing it on Westminster Highway, which is good because only 21% of respondents supported speed limit reductions on Westminster Highway from 50 to 30. I think it's really important that we don't make drastic changes to an area, especially when it's not supported, and it's easy to make decisions, you know, from a different neighborhood for another neighborhood, but that it's even more important in those situations to listen to the people who live there. I thought it was interesting that 62% of respondents supported the reduction in the local roads in the neighborhoods, because that's generally my consensus when I speak to anybody about it, is that I don't know anybody who drives 50 down a side street where there's homes, and you know, everybody should, and most people do drive quite a bit slower than 50. So I think it's really appropriate, and I think it was good that Councillor Liu brought up during the committee to have this looked at after 12 months to see how it went, see if there is any reduction in any incidences and people feeling safer with the lower speeds in the neighborhood. And that could be a pilot, you know, for all of our neighborhoods perhaps. So yeah, definitely more to come, and keep our eyes on this one and see how it goes. Thanks.
Okay, Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, I will be supporting everything on the consent agenda. I just want to mention a couple things about 3 items. Like other councillors have mentioned regarding the agricultural housing, I think that's a very crucial thing. It supports our strategic plan, it supports local food production, and it's just something that's very much needed in Richmond. We are very dependent on foreign workers and temporary workers coming in to deal with our crops. And it's an absolute fact that people who work farms, who own farms, are in desperate need of that labor and that support. So I think these are fantastic. So thank you for making that happen. On the Hamilton traffic plan, obviously I'm supporting that as well because it's on the consent agenda, but just a couple quick comments. First of all, thanks to staff for doing all the work on that. There was a lot of consultation and a lot of meetings. And the thing about neighborhoods and traffic, it's an issue in every neighborhood, in every city, probably throughout North America and probably around the world. So you're never going to get everybody agreeing on whatever solution you come up with to the issues. But one thing I did wonder about, and perhaps staff can comment on this, and I agree with what Councillor Galanders just said. When I'm driving through a neighborhood, a typical Richmond neighborhood, I'm not going 50K. Even though the speed limit is out, I'm probably doing somewhere in the mid-30s or maybe 40 if it's quiet and there's no kids on the road. So, but having said that, 30K for school zones totally makes sense. It's school days, it's during the week, it's got hours, 8 to 5, I believe they are. Why are we focused on 30, and why wouldn't we look at 40 kilometers, for instance, as a compromise in neighborhoods? Because if you're doing 40, that is relatively slow, and most people would, as Councillor Galanders said, would probably go less than that. Is that something we looked at, 40K versus 30?
To your worship, to Councillor Hobbs, yes, we have looked at that. The reasons that we have proposed 30 are that's in alignment with Vision Zero, and this is based on injuries that happen at different speeds, and at 30, the injuries are quite a bit lower than some of the other speeds. We also have precedent in the city for 30 kilometers an hour. We have that in Steveston, we have it at Barnes and Fleury and places like that. And as you've noted, it's also consistent with what we have for playgrounds and schools and things like that. On the other hand, the Transport 2050, the regional plan, promotes 40 kilometers an hour, that changing residential local roads to 40 kilometers an hour is what that plan proposes. So we didn't ask the public that question exactly, whether they prefer 40 or 30, or if they'd feel safer at 40 or 30. But based on our previous what we already have going on in the city and on Vision Zero, we've proposed 30.
Sure, okay, and that makes sense. Maybe that's something we can keep an eye on as we move forward. The other question is about on Westminster Highway, and again, I think Councillor McNulty brought this up too, the speed limit for trucks, commercial vehicles. Is it something we looked at having a lower speed for trucks like we see on some highways? I'm a big supporter of having lower speeds for large commercial vehicles. Is that something we looked at, or is that something that we could look at as we move forward?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, no, it's not anything. We didn't look at doing a separate speed limit for trucks on Westminster Highway. That's not altogether typical in a lot of municipalities, but as you noted, it is on some highways that I've been on for sure. Certainly if council gives staff direction to have a look at that, we certainly will.
Sure. And if the province is listening, I think they should be looking at that on all highways. Trucks should have a lower speed limit than cars, almost everywhere. One other thing I was just wanting you to clarify, because I don't, maybe members of the public aren't sure what you mean when you talk about the 85th percentile. So could you just give a layperson's explanation as to what you mean when you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's similar to average and things like that. The 85th percentile means that the speed that's given at the 85th percentile, it doesn't mean that everyone is going that fast. It means that 85% of the people are going below that speed limit. So they could be going anywhere from 20 to 50 kilometers an hour. If 50 kilometers an hour is the 85th percentile. So that does mean, of course, that 15% of the drivers are going above that speed.
Yeah, and that's the common measurement for doing this type of analysis, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, it's difficult to perform these analyses just looking at the single highest rate of speed or anything like that. That's not particularly meaningful, but the 85th percentile covers the vast majority of drivers on any roadway.
Sure, and just two other quick things. So when you get the 150K speed that I think is in the report somewhere, we don't know for sure what time that is, but it stands to reason that that was probably at a time of less traffic, like late at night or early in the morning, right?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, I don't have that with me, but I can find out. That's certainly in our data what time that is. But in some locations in the city, that you're correct. We often observe that as very early hours in the morning and very low traffic situations. In general, the more traffic we have, the more congestion there is, and the lower the speed limits become.
Right, volume is its own enforcer as far as speed goes, right? One last thing is just with the number of incidents or collisions that happen at intersections, it was 98%. We don't really have data on all the causal factors of that, right? Or the primary factors. It could be driver error, it could be somebody ignoring a sign. So although speed is always part of any collision, because if you're not moving, there's no collision, we don't know that it's the primary cause in those. Is that right?
Through your worship, Councillor Hobbs, no, you're correct. We do not know in those instances. At the end of the day, the information that we get from ICBC doesn't generally include what the factors were. Sometimes we've gone a little bit deeper on that, like with our top 20 intersections, where we did identify the major causal factors. And certainly, if that's something that we wanted to do for something like the Hamilton neighborhood or other neighborhoods in the city, we could go do that, but it's a lot of effort.
Sure. Well, thank you. Thanks for the report. It was well done, and it's a lot of work. So thank you, and I'll be supporting the recommendation.
Okay, Councillor Heed.
Yes, Mr. B, I might as well start with you. You know I'm an unyielding proponent of reducing speeds in city limits, and I'll continue to advocate for that. And it's no surprise to people sitting at this table, I'm an unyielding proponent for photo radar also, and I've said that many times and continue to advocate for that. I was surprised when I found out Westminster Highway was not included in the reduction of speed in Hamilton area, because every time I've been around that area and called by some of Michael's neighbors to come up, or Councillor Wolf's neighbors to come up and see that, you can see the excessive speed, the speeding that's conducted on Westminster Highway. I am in favor of reducing the speed for some GVWs over a certain limit, and I think we've got to look at that for commercial vehicles. I think that's all part of what we should do in that area and other areas in Richmond. So whatever, I don't know if Councillor McNulty is going to make a referral at some point, whether it's at Public Works or not, to look at that for the Hamilton area, but I certainly would be in support of that. And that's it for this part. I do have a couple questions with respect to the night market, Mayor. I don't know if anyone's here to answer them, but that's fine. I guess my questions relate to the cost recovery aspect of that, and I understand, including the RCMP and city staff, other city staff, there's about a $250,000 bill, and that's full cost recovery. Am I correct in assuming that?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, yes, it is a $250,000 bond that is held. The applicant is ultimately charged based on the actuals, and that bond is drawn down accordingly.
What is that, the actuals being over the last couple of years? Do you have that at hand? If not, I can get it later.
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, I don't have that information on hand. However, I would add that in past years, the operating hours were less and did require less hours of staff attendance as well.
You do make mention in your report where we're talking about the two uniformed police officers that are there during the time of the night market, but you do make mention of commercial crime units to address whether it's some knockoff marketing or something of that nature. Is that just covered under our general policing operations budget here in Richmond, or do we get cost recovery for those specialized units that may be required?
Through your worship to Councillor Heed, my understanding is that it is cost recovery for the attendance of those that RCMP staff on site.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
All right. Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'll be in support of everything on the consent agenda tonight. I'll just speak on one item further on the Hamilton area traffic calming. Item number 12, which is the neighborhood I live in as well. Back in our previous OCP for the area, there was about 5,100 people living in Hamilton, and the anticipation was by 2041 there'd be 12,000. So there's been a lot of growth happening in between those benchmark years. And I think we're at that time where it's feeling pretty tight in the neighborhood for the existing roadways and services. I think this is the right decision at the right time to provide the traffic calming for a growing density of people in a small, limited space. I am the member of council who's the liaison for the Hamilton Advisory Committee. I told them about all of this that were being proposed for tonight. They were all in favor of it, not a negative comment. I've been surveying the Hamilton residents Facebook group, which is 1,400 people, and not a single negative thing about any of the things that we're considering tonight. They do bring up other concerns, other specific intersections that I've spoken with staff, and they have legs. They have a subcommittee on their advisory committee where they'll be continuing to reach out with our transportation staff to address additional safety concerns they have. I also just want to highlight the fact that Hamilton is quite a distance from our bylaw office or trucks that leave in the morning from just out the door here, or the nearest community police office where RCMP vehicles are. So there is a lot of challenges that residents have when it comes to parking. So we often see parking in Hamilton where people go a little closer to the fire extinguisher, a little bit closer to the curb where they're not intersection, because there's just nowhere else for them to park. There's also challenges with sidewalks, that how many times we have to ask for crews to address sidewalks out there. They're just that much further away, and they get that much less service time, and it's just a challenge with the nature of the geography. So I think this warrants, and I look forward to other neighborhoods following this lead in reducing their speed limits called upon by the neighborhood. Thank you.
Councillor Au.
I'll support everything on the consent agenda. I have comments and questions on 2 items. The first one is about the night market. I think it's a very successful story that we have the night market in Richmond, and it was being identified as the most successful and biggest night market in North America. And I think the other cities are trying to copy from us. My question is that now, in the staff report, it's mentioned that in 2017, that's the first time that we approved the 3-year permit, and then it was renewed in 2021, and then now it expires in 2023. So this is the 3rd time that we extend the permit. My question is there a limit of how many times they can renew? And if not, how is this different from other permits that we use to some other operations? Because I know that in some cases we would just allow for renewal once and then that's it. So how is this different from the other permits?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, there is no limitation on the number of temporary use permits that can be issued for a site consecutively. There are limits in terms of once you have made a temporary use permit, you have to reapply for a 3-year extension. At the termination of that, you have to then reapply for an application. So what we see in the situation with the night market is multiple every 3-year increments applications being submitted for temporary use permit.
Okay, good. My second question is about the general assessment of the operation. So in the past few years, what kind of complaints that we have received, like parking, traffic, or, any violations of bylaws?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, my understanding is that there has been relatively few complaints that have been received. I believe we received 1 last year, and actually Mr. Mark Corrado may be able to help me out on this one.
Through your worship to Councillor Au, we received 1 noise complaint last year, and then the prior year we received 1 parking complaint.
Okay, how about parking?
1 complaint related to parking.
Okay, good, thank you. Yeah, so I'm in support of extending the permit. My second comment is on the Hamilton area traffic calming. Again, I was reluctant, as I expressed in the committee meeting, that we have to apply this reduction of speed in this whole whole area. Because staff has mentioned that there's no speeding issue, it's more perception. And I wonder, if we reduce the speed limit from 50 to 30 kilometers per hour, what are we going to do to measure the success or any kind of feedback that we will collect from the local residents?
Through your worship to Councillor Au, we are certainly planning to continue to monitor the speed in that area to see if the speeds do change, and we do plan to do another survey in a period of time. We haven't determined when yet, but probably in 6 months to a year to see if people feel any differently.
Yeah, I would suggest that perhaps after 1 year we should have a survey and to receive feedback from the local residents. Yes, so with that I support everything on the consent agenda.
Okay, thank you. So we'll call the question then on the consent agenda. All those in favor? Any opposed? It's carried. All right, that brings us to the one item that was taken or didn't make it to the consent agenda, put it that way. That would be number 14, and we'll go to Councillor Liu, who's the chair of the Community Safety Committee, to introduce it.
Thank you, Worship. Number 14 is options for enforcement of escort services and body rubs. The motion is that number 1, that option 2 is described in the staff report titled Options for Enforcement of Escort Services and Body Rub Studios, dated January 16th, 2024, from the General Manager, Community Safety, be endorsed. And number 2, that staff amend the Business License Bylaw 7360, the Business Regulation Bylaw number 7538, the Municipal Ticket Information Authorization Bylaw number 7321, and the Notice of Bylaw Violation Dispute Adjudication Bylaw number 8122. And I would so move. And just to speak a little bit on this, what it does is this just brings it in line with things like our illegal ride-hailing, short-term rentals, our tree bylaw, and our soil bylaws that permit staff to, when they issue a ticket, to give the same price of tickets and the ability to serve more than one ticket at a time when they go in and check for bylaw offenses on premises.
All right, Councillor Glanders.
Thank you, Your Worship. I will not be supporting this. I would have been nice if we could discuss it and have done a referral maybe before moving and seconding it, but that's okay. It'll be what it is as far as the vote goes, and regardless of how the vote goes, I would still like to make a referral at the end. I'm recommending that we don't endorse this right now without some more information, because I think we've been presented with a lot of really significant evidence that going this route is causing more harm to women. So I don't think we can compare doing bylaws like this as the same as tree bylaws and soil and other things, because those don't have human people as victims and as possible consequences of the bylaws. So I think it's really serious, and it's important that we really know more about this industry and about what other municipalities are doing and what the current best practices are. I really appreciate it coming forward. I appreciate the spirit behind trying to crack down on human trafficking or making sure that women are safe, trying to not have dangerous industries in Richmond. But and I think that was the spirit of it, and I appreciate what bylaws did with it as far as stepping up enforcement as they were asked to and what their findings were. But we are hearing substantial evidence that the bylaws are too stringent and difficult in this industry and possibly don't align with current best practice and extensive research from experts that we've heard from. So I think when we hear from this number of experts that know what they're talking about, we really have to listen. And so I would like to see us researching our bylaws, consulting with these groups, and comparing it to other municipalities to make sure that we're doing what's aligned with current best practice.
All right, Councillor Heed.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to point out, and I congratulated our bylaw people for doing a job here. All they're asking for is compliance. All we're asking these people do is to comply, whether we have a moral responsibility to take care of the women or not. Comply with the bylaw like we expect other people to comply with our bylaws here in Richmond. That's all they're trying to do when they go in and they conduct these particular compliance checks. I think it's incumbent upon the owner and not just the manager and whoever the owner is. You got to remember, these are not non-profit body rub parlors. These are for-profit body rub parlors. And we are aware of some of the characters, the unsavory characters that have been behind some of the ones here in Richmond. There is human trafficking going on with respect to this. I'm not necessarily naming them in Richmond, but in general, if you look at the experts in the area, like Bernard Perrin, who wrote the book on with respect to human trafficking, who used to be chief of staff for the previous prime minister and a prof at UBC, in some of his discussion with respect to human trafficking. This is cash for sex services, and we are actually licensing this. If you recall, that's why the original information came up. It wasn't to shut them down, like I'm being alleged to have put forward. No, it was just to comply with our current bylaw at this particular time. And I think it's incumbent upon us to make sure businesses do comply with our bylaw, because that's the only real issue we have with respect to this at this particular time. I'm not even going near, and we'll leave it up to the police to deal with the property use and the common body houses that are in a lot of our towers and condominium projects and apartments here in Richmond. I think that's a discussion for another day, but this one in particular, I'm in support of what Mr. Corrado's recommendation is, option 2. And hopefully the people that are managing it and the owners do comply with the bylaw. Thank you.
Councillor McNulty.
Yes, thank you, Worship. Thank you, Worship. I had a couple of questions, actually, of staff, if I may. The way the report is written, and obviously I agree we want to have some compliance, and but at the same time we want to have insurance safety. And I guess the questions I asked, if the fines are being increased, what are we increasing them to, and what are we achieving?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, staff will come forward with a report that will recommend the fine increases. They will most likely be in line with the existing BVN and MTI tickets. The BVN range maxes out at 500 and the MTI range maxes out at 1,000. Currently, the maximum fine is $100 for an MTI, and that's quite low.
Okay, well, I think I mentioned before at the committee, I'd like to see the bylaws attached so we know what they are, because I don't know what the fines are. And I guess the other question, who's getting fined? Is it the owner? Is it the operator? Or is it the victim?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, the owner and the operator can receive fines. Staff do not target the employees at the business.
Okay, well, that's a question I think we have to ask. I agree with you. Your 4 bylaws will enhance effectiveness as a ticket process. Okay, fine. I had a question on, there have been no licensed escort services. You want to drop that one. What if somebody came along tomorrow, if we dropped it, and wanted to have a business in Richmond? Does it mean we wouldn't have an escort business in Richmond?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, there hasn't been an application for a escort service license in over 8 years, and I think there's a little bit of confusion as to what an escort service is defined under our bylaw. It's defined as someone who accompanies another person for social occasions. That terminology is a bit arcane in today's environment.
There might be some reasons why we haven't had an application. Again, I'm just trying to flush this out. Do we have a certain inspection process and procedure when our bylaw officers go in there, like a checklist, they're going to do this, this, and this?
Through your worship to Councillor McNulty, staff have been conducting inspections on body rubs for almost 20 years. They follow the standard procedure. There's a number of different violations that are listed in detail in the bylaws, and staff go through and check for compliance with all of those provisions.
Okay. A number of years ago, we had that, and it was available to council to know what was going on in that. And unfortunately, obviously, we don't now. I don't know why. Obviously, not an area we're proficient in, but having to make a decision. I have to say, I really had a little trouble, although I support it. Under this enhanced regime, the word regime, this is a regime we're having. Sorry to put it out, but it is in public. We will continue to monitor and perform our parts and collect data and find back to community safety in 1 year. I appreciate you coming back in 1 year, but I didn't know I was endorsing a regime. Okay? We want to do what the public want. We want compliance, we want safety, and I hope it will achieve what we want it to. And I would suggest we look at it in terms of 6 months. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Day.
Thank you very much, Mayor Brody. Okay, so to be clear, the owner gets the fine, not the worker.
Through your worship, Councillor Day, that's correct.
Okay. Now, it says on page 176 that remove anachronistic business license subcategory escort services, because there hasn't been, since 2015, an escort service that has asked for a business license in Richmond. If a business should come up next month and say, well, I'd like to have an escort service in Richmond, how would that work?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, if this new amendment were passed, the applicant would not be able to apply for that license. The reason, again, as stated before, we haven't seen an application for that is because of the fact that that language is no longer used as an escort service. In today's parlance, escort services connote something different than someone accompanying someone for a social occasion.
So we would have, if someone wanted to have a service to escort, people who come in from the YVR to an event, they wouldn't be able to get a business license? Would they just be under the wire then?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, you wouldn't require a business license just to accompany someone to a social event.
But if you were paid?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, there are other service use categories that could be utilized.
Okay, so while we're getting rid of that subcategory, there's still other categories that were allowed for the same kind of social service.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, for example, a tourism type business, a tour guide business, we'd have to elaborate a little bit further on the hypothetical to go into detail.
Okay, I just don't want things to go underground. If there's going to be an escort service, I think it should be licensed and monitored. So maybe you could bring back a memo on what that would look like, how tourism bylaws would affect it. Okay, so there's examples of reasons that we would give a fine, and I believe one of them is there must be 2 employees on the premises. Is that correct?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, some examples of fines that we would use that are listed there are typically the one we see most often is when the employees are not registered, when the windows are not in plain view, if there's locks on the doors, these types of violations.
So is it safe to say that those regulations are to keep the workers that work there safe?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the intent is to keep workers and the customers safe, and that's can be seen in the fact that there are criminal background checks of those workers.
Well, that makes good sense. Do you know what percentage of sex workers choose the profession because they can make more money as opposed to those that maybe don't feel they have a choice?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, I'm not an expert on sex work per se. We are regulators and monitor licensed legal activity.
Okay.
As I stated earlier to Council, Section 286 2.5 prohibits sex work as part of a commercial enterprise. There are no exceptions for that, hence why the city cannot regulate that activity, and we don't monitor that because that's a criminal code issue.
That's my next question is, what is the difference between a federal law and versus the bylaw here in Richmond? Because as far as I know, prostitution is still illegal in Canada.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, the prostitution is not defined in the criminal code, so I may defer to my colleagues from law. Profiting as a commercial enterprise as a result of sex work remains illegal.
Okay. Do you want to touch on that?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, Mr. Crowd is correct in his articulation.
Okay, great. And okay, so right now, if the door is locked, if the window's not covered or is covered, if there isn't more than 2 people, they get a $100 fine. But if these changes are approved, you could raise those fines between $500 and $1,000 to the owner of the business.
Through your worship to Councillor Day, indeed, we would follow our existing program of beginning with education, prevention, warnings. Typically, we begin with BVNs at 500, proceeding to MTIs, which are 1,000, and then following that, there could be court action, or there could be a report that's brought forward to council as well regarding the status of the business.
Okay, and my last question is on page 175, you talk about investigations into major criminal sex work enterprises. And there's been a number of incidents, I'm not going to go into the details, but basically where it was found there were women mostly women, I suppose, who were victims of human trafficking. The changes that you're proposing today, would that help investigate human trafficking and sexual exploitation or hurt it?
Through your worship to Councillor Day, none of these investigations occurred in and around licensed businesses. What we have seen, which is very encouraging, is as a result of the inspection activity, we've seen a substantial uptick in the number of businesses that have come forward and registered their employees without effort. We've assisted them in doing so. So we are seeing increased compliance.
Okay, so it might be a way to normalize it. All right, thank you very much.
Councillor Wolf.
Thank you, Your Worship. At the community safety meeting, which I attended, there was another delegate who spoke, Dr. Jessica Taylor, Richmond resident. And one of the things that came across from her presentation was the statement that sex workers, through constant investigative interactions, leads to unintentionally being pushed into more dangerous micro-brothels run by organized crime. And I think our delegates today also echoed that. We, members of council, received some closed confidential memos as well, which I can't speak to, unfortunately. However, I'm convinced that going ahead today with option number 2 is not the right thing to do. And by going with option 2, it doesn't wipe out what we've already done and the historical work we've done with these locations and the established bylaws. I'm at the mindset that option 1, which is our status quo in this case, and I don't normally advocate for status quo, but this one I do because it maintains the current enforcement model. And I don't think that's actually the best model. So I do want to see some form of enhanced model, but I don't necessarily think that those of us around the table are the ones to provide that. We've had groups come up to us to say, through, this is much a larger stack of paper than we got over the 8 hours of deliberation on a different item last week, or 2 weeks ago. And I'm not nearly well equipped to speak to all the content in there. But I think we should have our staff work with the organizations that are familiar with this and are experts in it, and then come back. So perhaps Councillor Galander's referral motion coming up will help to address that. But before we go ahead with what we've heard is dangerous, harmful, pushing people into less safe environments that they're likely going to continue to do, because some claim that sex work is the oldest profession, but others say farming is probably older. But 4,000 years or so we've had brothels occurring, run by priests and other establishments. It's just how the human culture has come to be. So we're not going to get rid of it. Ideally, we'd be getting rid of the perpetrators of the criminal acts, not the victim side of things. But that, again, is already being done with the existing investigative approach that we have. But it's going to be even harder to do when you look across the street, all the new condos that are sitting empty. It's even more places to check for these things to be going on in. And it's just, I don't see an overall benefit of making this recommended strengthening of the bylaw for what? For a very small fraction of cost recovery or dollars that we will get from these organizations that are making a way huger profit on top of what small fines that they get levied with. So I thank staff for continuing to do the great work that they're doing, but we've heard that Burnaby, New West, and Vancouver are all doing things that we are not. And if it takes this being brought forward, then I celebrate the the fact that this has come here, and we might actually get a different level of consultation with local groups, a different way to have people registered so it doesn't have to be intrusive, and have them contemplate if they should continue at this place in time or go it alone. And so yeah, I'm hoping there's a motion, a referral motion coming soon. But before that, I think we need to vote down this option 2. Thank you.
Councillor Howe.
Your Worship, I think we're talking about different things here. I think for one, we're talking about enforcing our bylaws. We know that we have the legal establishment in Richmond, and they got their license because they have to, or they are committed to follow the regulations. And we have seen violations, and we have seen that sometimes staff found out that it's difficult for them to really to have full enforcement of those bylaws. So I would support that when staff is asking us for some changes so that they can do their job in enforcing the bylaws in a better way, I would support that and give them the tools that they need to have. However, I think there's another aspect of it. I think it's being raised many times that we might have to review our law enforcement model and the issue of safety of the sex workers, and whether or not there would be unintended consequences. So I would be in support of having some kind of review, learning lessons from other cities about how they put their models into practice and what kind of improvements that we have to make. And I think there's another issue that we haven't addressed, and I hope that sometime in the future, at a different time, we can address it, which is organized crime and those illegal establishments. I believe that this is a big issue. I believe that the legal establishments right now, they might not be as involved in organized crime such as trafficking or human trafficking and other things. But the illegal establishments would have a bigger problem. So I hope that in the future, we will have another report or, another assessment of situation of those illegal establishments. So I would support moving forward with the changes of the being recommended by staff for now. But I think we shouldn't stop here. We should improve our system and look into the other aspects of the problem, which is the illegal operations.
Councillor Hobbs.
Thanks, and through the chair, thanks for the report and the information, and also thanks to the delegates for coming forward to a couple different meetings, actually. Just want to clarify that I don't, first of all, I want to compliment our police and our bylaw officers who go out daily and do various kinds of enforcement with us, and just make the point that, we're talking about compliance with an existing bylaw, and we're talking about enhancing essentially the mechanisms that they can use to ensure compliance with that bylaw. That's really what it is. When it comes to guidelines like the BC Association of Chiefs of Police guidelines in this area, it's my understanding that our local RCMP detachment, and I don't expect you to speak for them, but and our bylaws operate under that umbrella and with those guidelines in mind. Is that a fair understanding on my part?
Through your worship to Councillor Hobbs, bylaws does work very closely with the RCMP. I would add the BC Chiefs of Police guidelines don't actually address licensed body rubs. They strictly deal with sex work.
Sure, I think in the broader scheme of things, when we talk about trust and, not building an environment full of hostility and getting people to, confide and talk and not making people feel like they're being penalized, and then not forcing people into underground situations where there's no question that people are at greater risk if that happens. That's what I'm talking about. So that is the environment that we're operating in. That's my understanding.
All right, Mrs. Cham, Cecilia, you have something to add?
Yes, through the mayor, just a reminder that the OIC is actually on Zoom. If there's any questions on the criminal investigative side, the chief is available to speak on that.
All right, so. Yep.
Sure, unless the chief has
go
got,
ahead.
I don't have a question for the chief myself.
Go ahead.
Okay. Thanks. I just want to then also add that, not a question, but the bylaw fines we're talking about aren't a substantial change in how we're operating or how we're doing business. When they're issued to the owner of a business, that's not going to be changing how they do things or what they do in a fundamental way. I just close with this. I think the comments made by the delegates are important as far as the environment we create, and I don't mind having a look at things after tonight. But enhancing our bylaw enforcement ability and ensuring compliance with our business bylaws in this respect is not mutually exclusive to ensuring that we're providing as safe a work environment as we can for different people that work at all kinds of businesses. So I just don't find the two things mutually exclusive. Thank you, Your Worship.
All right. Councillor Day, you want to have something more to say. You have spoken. And okay, but I'm going to remind you that we are here to talk about options for enforcement of escort services, not the criminality of all that we're dealing with here.
My question of the OIC, the Chief of Police, is how would these bylaw changes, we know how it would assist bylaw officers, but how would it assist RCMP?
All right, we'll go to our OIC. Do you have any comments on that?
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Day. The police enforcement priorities still remain the same. Our priorities are still based on the risk assessment and obviously, making sure that the individuals are treated in a compassionate manner. However, based on the BC guidelines, the priorities are still focused on whether if it's a child or youth sexual exploitation or trafficking taking place, or if there's adult human trafficking cases that are at play, or if there are any reports of abuse or violence that's involved, or any involvement of organized crime. Angles that are associated to these type of situations, those would be the police priorities in these instances.
So the question is, how do the changes in the bylaws help or hurt that process?
The police priorities still remain the same. I would say these are, sorry, to the chair, to Councillor Day, the police priorities still remain the same. If there's criminal investigations, we will take appropriate actions. However, the bylaw component remains separate from police obligations.
All right. Okay, with that, I'm going to call the question then on the motion. What? Yes, you normally push your button when you want to speak.
Sorry.
Go ahead and wrap it up.
Okay. Thank you. I realize this has become a little bit contentious, and what we're looking at is enforcing our bylaws. We have bylaws, we'd like to enforce them. It's certainly a lot easier to prove a bylaw violation than a crime that has been committed. We're not looking to close things down specifically. We're looking to make sure our bylaws are being followed, the bylaws that we have. I have no problem with consenting adults engaging in activities. I am concerned that if people have a storefront and a business license, that they comply with the bylaws that we have here in Richmond. And I think that that's the important thing. We have already shown in other areas, illegal ride-hailing, short-term rentals, our tree bylaws and our soil bylaws, that we're serious about enforcing them, and we have raised our ticketing for those things, and I think we should have it for this as well, to ensure that people are following the bylaws. Thank you.
All right. We'll call the question then. All those in favor? Those opposed? It's carried with Councillors Galanders and Wolf opposed. Sorry, Councillor Galanders, you have a referral motion of some sort you want to make?
I would like to, please, Your Worship, thank you. I have a referral that staff research and review our policies relating to escort services and body rub studios by consulting with agencies such as Swan, Pace Society, Living in Community, and Pivot Legal Society, as well as compare against bylaws in other municipalities. Then staff report back with findings and options to ensure our policies are aligned with current best practices.
Frankly, we don't have that in front of us. I wish we did. Not to mention, we don't have any warning of that, other than the general discussion. My suggestion is you
I
take it.
told you last Friday that I was going to do that.
You told me last Friday.
Yeah, when we had a meeting, and then I mentioned it today.
No, just a minute. I'm suggesting you take that to community safety. And you can put forward that same motion and discuss it and see what the Community Safety Committee thinks of it.
Okay.
All right, so that brings us to public announcements and events. I've got a very important statement to read out, which is it's remaining from the very contentious meetings we had a couple of weeks ago, and the very I won't characterize the actions of the Vancouver Coastal Health in response, but the actions which did not generate a lot of respect from me anyway. It's on the supervised consumption site. On February 13th, City Council adopted a resolution by a vote of 7-2 to study the feasibility of a supervised consumption site located at the hospital in Richmond. The resolution did not state that the city would establish a site. Council has no legal ability to do that. Only Vancouver Coastal Health can do this with the approval of Health Canada. Vancouver Coastal Health has now publicly stated it will not open a supervised consumption site in Richmond. That means the discussion on whether there will be a supervised consumption site in Richmond is closed. There will be no site and no further discussion by Council on this matter. In discussing this decision, it is important to note that the operators of the supervised consumption sites do not hand out drugs to people, nor do they encourage drug use by children or non-drug users. A supervised consumption site assists with addiction treatment and recovery services. A site does help to reduce overdose deaths. 26 Richmond residents died from a drug overdose in 2023. Sadly, others will likely die this year. Keeping our community safe is paramount, and Council will always explore ways to do that. However, there will be no further discussion on the possibility of a supervised consumption site in Richmond. Then we have an appointment to announce, 2 appointments. Both of them they go to December 31st. The first one is to the end of this year, and the second one is to the end of next year. So the first one is for the Vancouver International Airport Environmental Advisory Committee, and it's an announcement that Olivia Hui was appointed to the Vancouver International Airport Environmental Advisory Committee as a representative from the Advisory Committee on the Environment for a 1-year term to expire at the end of December 2024. And then from the Richmond Food Security and Agriculture Advisory Committee, Cynthia Zhao was appointed to the Richmond Food Security and Agriculture Advisory Committee as the representative from the Advisory Committee on the Environment for a 2-year term to expire December 31st, 2025. Then we have a few general announcements as well. First of all, we have Pink Shirt Day. Reminder that Wednesday, February 28th is Pink Shirt Day. The City of Richmond, the School District, Richmond Fire Rescue, the RCMP, and the Public Library encourage everyone to wear pink that day to promote kindness and anti-bullying. For a list of Pink Shirt Day activities, visit the city's website. Then there's a number of public and statutory notices on the city website, and we're posting these at this point. They are for significant events like public meetings, elections, public hearings, and land dispositions in accordance with the Community Charter and the Local Government Act. Being online makes them accessible from anywhere at any time, and you can find the link to public notices on the city website homepage. Then we have the Qingdao exhibit at City Hall. We're currently hosting a special imagery exhibition to celebrate our Friendship City relationship with the city of Qingdao in China. Richmond and Qingdao became Friendship Cities in April of 2008. Information booklets and cityscape postcards are also on display, along with stunning images and photos of Qingdao. The exhibit is on the main level of the City Hall until March the 10th, and I do commend it to your attention. And finally, Sunday, March 10th is the start of Ramadan. Observed by Muslims worldwide, it's a holy month of fasting, prayer, and reflection ending on April 9th. So on behalf of Council and the City, we wish everyone in our Muslim community a very happy Ramadan. So, Madam Clerk, bylaw for adoption.
Thank you, Your Worship. There is one bylaw for final adoption with no opposition.
Moved and seconded, discussion. All those in favor, any opposed, that is carried. May I have a motion to resolve in the Committee of the Whole to hear delegations on non-agenda items? Second. All those in favor, opposed, carried. So we have with us former New Westminster City Councillor Chuck Puckmeyer from City Visions to delegate on challenges facing Zodiac Karaoke and related businesses in Richmond. Sir. Sir, if you want to come forward, if you've got someone with you, if you could introduce them. But introduce yourself and you've got 5 minutes.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for entertaining us tonight. Happy Chinese New Year. I'm with Kenny Gu, owner of the Zodiac Cabaret, Zodiac Karaoke Club and Pub, located at 8191 Alexander Road in Richmond. We are here to ask council to entertain the process of allowing us to extend. I'm going to speak in the terms of Kenny. I'm going to speak for him, but I totally support the positions that we are taking. This is since reopening post-COVID, we have seen a trend of customers at our establishment wanting to attend at later hours and wishing to stay longer. The investment in the Zodiac Club, it was $7.5 million. We invite you all to come and have a look. It's a very elaborate facility. We did so to provide complete visual, immersive sound experience at our club. We also created rooms for smaller groups to enjoy more personal and intimate experience with friends and associates through song. Our observation is that young professionals today enjoy entertainment at later hours. Many work late, they like to dine late, and they like to experience leisure hour activities at a later time. Recently, the City of Richmond extended some restaurant liquor hours to I believe 2 a.m., including patron participation in karaoke. This has a severe impact on our investment, as patrons will now stay longer in restaurants, leaving less time to potentially attend our establishment. Our competitors in Vancouver, my instructions are that some of them are able to serve alcohol until 4 a.m. We operate a very professional and secure facility. We have trained our staff to be extremely vigilant, especially with regards to enforcing the smoking bylaw on our premises. Kenny, I was previously a non-managing partner in this establishment with the very little hands-on operation involvement. During COVID-19 2020, Kenny became the sole owner of the Zodiac Cabaret, Zodiac Karaoke Club. Our security is state-of-the-art. All of our participants enter through a professional staffed security metal detector. Our door personnel have extensive security training. Our facility was built with the highest degree of soundproofing, so to seamlessly operate into the late hours with no adverse impacts on our community. Our private karaoke activities are always visible for inspection through windows and door access. We have a very professional clientele who enjoy the semi-private karaoke experience. Our cabaret section is extremely elaborate with lights, technology, lighting, lasers, and a three-dimensional dance floor. With the extended hour, 1 hour, we would be in a better position to meet the many challenges facing us today. Richmond's extended restaurant patron participation hours to 2, the 4 a.m. Vancouver service hours, just minutes away from us, have affected us. We, like most entertainment facilities, are experiencing the impacts of a slowing economy, inflation, utilities, taxes increasing into our margins, cutting into our margins. We are desperately seeking the help of the Mayor and Council so that we may extend our opening hours so slightly, primarily on the weekends, holidays, Sundays, as we struggle to retain our growing significant investment in Richmond. Pubs have a very unfair advantage. They're able to serve alcohol for 14 hours. Restaurants are allowed to be open 24 hours and now have the extended liquor and patron participation. We are a niche market. The Zodiac Cabaret Club opens from 9 at night until 2 in the morning. That's 5 hours. What business invests $7 million and is only allowed to open for 5 hours? Some of the karaoke clubs are open longer, but they, the first 2 hours from 7 to 9 virtually have no business. I have a letter here, a disclosure from the president of the BC Restaurant Association. I don't think I have time. It's in your package. I've supplied that all. He's certainly supportive, understands what the issues are here. I also have a petition from 4 related businesses of the karaoke type businesses in Richmond that are asking for the same assistance.
Okay.
If there are any questions, we would love to answer them.
We'll go for questions. It's a reminder of questions. Councillor McNulty.
Yeah, thank you. I have a question and then a referral. A question to you, sir. You mentioned in your thing, we are a group of Richmond nightlife and pub establishments. How many are in your group?
Oh, there's four that signed this.
The ones that signed it.
They're this type of business.
Okay, you've submitted it to us.
Yes,
okay.
It's in the package.
Thanks very much. Your Worship, I want to make a referral to staff to review this particular document, but also to examine the hours of operations of karaoke and nightclubs, but also restaurants, pubs, and fast foods that are, in some cases, open late and some to 24 hours to look at the whole thing and come back with their recommendations.
May I suggest all that's being asked for is karaoke? And
okay.
My suggestion is
all right, karaoke and nightclubs.
Okay, karaoke and nightclubs. Okay, is that seconded? I'll second it. Okay, so that's moved and seconded. Councillor Day.
Thank you very much for coming forward. So I just had a question. If you weren't serving alcohol, you could stay open longer. Isn't that right?
I don't believe so. No. I think the closing time is the closing time.
Okay.
Once the alcohol stops, there's 30 minutes for the patrons to leave.
Okay,
right.
and you noted in your letter that you have metal detectors. You don't often see businesses that have metal detectors. What's the reason for those? Years
ago, karaoke had a really bad rap. There were, I know in my city, we had some concerns with them. That's changed, but providers that put in that kind of a security to ensure that there's no gang activity, that anyone coming in there isn't carrying a weapon. Like it's for the protection of the clientele and the protection of the staff. And it also shows people that this is not a place you want to go if you're involved in that activity.
So in Vancouver right now, your letter states that you can stay open till 4 a.m. and you're asking for 3 a.m.
Yes, and I believe that's in the Granville Entertainment District.
Okay, so limited area. Okay,
which is close by.
Okay, yeah. And so it's basically 4 clubs, number 88, Choose Club, Millennium Karaoke, and Zodiac Karaoke. Are they all looking to stay open till?
Yes, yes, they are.
Okay, so we could, now, in terms of police incidents, have there been any files that the police have had to deal with because of these businesses?
You know, with respect, I think that's what the referral is going to talk
Okay.
about.
All right, that makes sense.
Neighborhood impacts, crime activity, blah, blah, you know, et cetera. Okay, Councillor Wolf.
Yes, thank you. I had a question about the timing, because I went on the website and it said it's from 8 p.m. to 2 every day, and then at the bottom of the website it says 8 p.m. to 2:30 every day, and then you said 9 p.m. So like, what's your hours opening?
Yes, the Zodiac opens at 9. Some of them do open at 7, and some of them do open at 8. If you open at 6, no one's going to come there. If you can't open at lunch. It's just such a niche market that no one goes there.
Yeah, I'm not interested in the other
It may
places.
say 2:30, that's because the last call is at 2.
But that's only 2 days a week you have till 2:30.
At Zodiac.
Yeah, but on the website it says it's open every day till 2:30, so that isn't accurate.
Is it open every day until 2, and then 2:30 is when you have to actually be out?
We open to 2, but 2:30 is everybody should leave.
Yeah.
Is that every day or just the
Every day.
weekend?
Every
So that's
day.
every day.
Okay, so there's just 3 different time sets. And then the last thing I just want to comment is I'm going to have to call either a notice of motion or challenge the chair because Councillor Glanders didn't get to do a referral motion tonight.
Excuse me, Councillor Wolf, she said that that was okay, she would take it to committee.
It wasn't okay.
Well, apparently it was because she said it was okay.
I'm still going to call notice of motion or challenge the chair.
Well, you're a bit late to do either one of them.
This one, we haven't voted on this yet.
Councillor Liu.
Thank you, Worship. Thank you for coming out. So are most of your customers then sort of Richmond-based? Because I guess the Canada line closes down at 1 o'clock, so people aren't going back into Vancouver at 2 a.m. as much. Like, it's more of a Richmond crowd, is it?
There's a lot of Uber, but yeah, are most of your customers Richmond-based, or are they from all over?
From all over.
All over, okay, thank you.
All right, so we're going to call,
Can I just, there's a couple of little typos in here and a couple time changes. I'm going to forward a clean copy of this to the clerk and replace the one that I submitted to you.
Yep. All right, thank you. We will excuse you. Thank you. And we're going to call on the referral motion. Yes, Councillor.
I don't have this in writing, and so notice of motion.
What?
This is a referral motion. If we couldn't get a referral motion on the last, a couple items ago, then we shouldn't have a referral item on this.
Councillor Wolf. Councillor Glanders suggested making a referral motion. It was clearly better off to go to committee, and she understood that.
She had it in writing.
And it's done.
She had it in
All
writing.
those in favor?
Wrong process.
Any opposed? It's carried with Councillor Wolf opposed. May I have a motion to rise and report? All those in favor? Any opposed? That's carried. We are now adjourned.